Well, good morning and welcome to Fountain Street Church. My name is Reverend Christopher Rowe, and I have the honor and the privilege of serving on the staff here at this beautiful temple of love and sanctuary of peace in downtown Grand Rapids. This morning, we are just 2 weeks out from the end of our summer speaker series. This is a series that is brought to us year after year by the Religious Services Committee. And this summer, even with the wrench of COVID-19, the committee and our church found ways to still make this time-honored tradition work. And this morning is no different as we welcome Milinda Ysasi to our virtual pulpit. This is a special treat this morning and one I've been looking forward to since the beginning of the summer. As I mentioned, I'm Christopher Rowe, and I'm one of the people here that calls this place my spiritual home, and I'm on board with the congregation and the other clergy and all of the staff and everyone who calls this their home. Welcome to Fountain Street Church. I am so glad you are with us this morning, and thank you for being here. During the offering this morning, I invite you to think about giving freely and living generously. As I mentioned, week after week, the offering is split 50-50, with 50% going directly back into the community through our social action grants, and 50% staying in this cathedral of love and hope and dreams to keep this 151-year ministry going forward. Every week I mention that this is our greatest calling in life, to love our neighbor, and this week is no different. Every penny and dime and nickel that you are able to give to this institution generously goes back into the community and making the world a better place. And it is just one tangible way in which we each embody that spirit of love for the neighbor even those we may never meet or know. And so with this spirit of generosity and in dreaming of a better world, the offering will now be taken.
My name is Milinda Ysasi. I'm Second Ward City Commissioner here in Grand Rapids, and I'm so happy to be here virtually with all of you today, this Sunday. And I'm just here to share some of my thoughts and some reflections. And while I'm very sad that we are not in person, I am glad that we are all physically distancing but not socially distancing from one another. As I prepared my thoughts for today, I was really reminded of one of the last events that I went to here in Grand Rapids was the International Women's Day celebration at Fountain Street Church. I was asked to provide some remarks, and there were just so many wonderful people, people sharing songs and dancing and traditions, and just a lot of love and energy in the building. And so I take that feeling, that emotion that I had of that day, which I can remember quite vividly, and have put that in my brain here for all of you today. You know, when I was sworn into office, which was in December 17th, I believe was the day, when I gave my speech, I talked about a few things, but I specifically remember saying that I was asking my ancestors to guide me on this journey over the next 4 years. My family came here to Grand Rapids in the late 40s, early 50s, initially as farm workers a little north of Grand Rapids, and then settling in to the west side of Grand Rapids. And so my parents were born here. My grandparents came shortly after my great-grandparents did, for the jobs and opportunity like many of our other families. And while I asked them to guide me over these 4 years, when I was saying that, I was thinking about not just the first year, but what would the third year be like, and the fourth year, and perhaps even that next term, as I would have prepared for, as I prepare for that, 4 years from that day. But little did I know that I was really going to need their guidance over the first 6 months, the first 9 months of my term. Many of you know Commissioner Ruth Kelly. She was so supportive of me during my race, has been so supportive during this transition, and is just somebody who is a dear friend. And she often, as we will call, and she'll say, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry about all of this. And the reality is it's not anybody's fault, but we could have never imagined that this first year in office would have three crises in front of us. One of COVID, one of an economic collapse and recession, so many jobs lost, and third, really this reckoning of systemic racism in our country and a recognition of what does it mean to be safe, here in our community, in our country. And so every day, most of my meetings have been occurring at home for City Commission. But over the last couple of months, I have started to go into the office, go into City Hall, just to be there. For me, rituals are very important. So this ritual of coming together on Sundays, of being in community with one another, it is interesting to do it, from my computer. And so I miss that ritual so much, of going into City Hall and sitting at the dais and being with my colleagues and city staff and listening to people and listening to the presentations. That's one of the things that I sort of miss most. And so when I walk into City Hall to do a little bit of that, to mostly Zoom from my office, I ask my ancestors to continue to guide me, because I absolutely need their wisdom and their commitment to hard work and the strength that they have. And that is what has fueled me. I have absolutely no regrets about running for office. Many people have asked me that over the last 9 months. I am still so happy that I did it. And I think that anything worth doing, it just has to matter. Something that takes you away from your family, time with your family, time away from work, or time from friends, it has to matter. And that's certainly important to me. And this work of the City Commission, I think no matter when you do it, it is an honor and it's a privilege and it's important. But in this moment, it seems even a little bit more special. And I feel even a little bit more humbled that I've been elected to serve, that I get to sit around with my colleagues and our city manager to really ensure that the growth and prosperity of Grand Rapids reaches all neighbors, no matter what part of the city that they live in, no matter if they've lived here for 40 years, or if they've lived here for 5, or if they've just come here maybe because of COVID. That is what has guided me, not only in my campaign, but when I think about our strategic plan and I think about our commitment to equity, and really for me, it's how do we operationalize that? So, on May 30th, I was downtown at the protests. I went with my husband and friends, and we walked and we connected with people. And while it was a little scary to be in such a big group of people at that time, it was just also very energizing and motivating. It was something that I felt I needed to do for myself, to be down there in community with people, to say that I was protesting another murder of a Black American, of George Floyd, of Breonna Taylor, and wanting to make sure that we don't see that in our community, or we don't see that subsequently in other communities. And so into the night, I watched that. I stayed up pretty much all evening, talking with people, connecting with people, checking in with my parents, they're asking me what was going on. And, I don't remember much about that evening other than feeling very helpless, feeling that even as an elected official, what could I do to change the situation that we were in? And now we were experiencing, this reckoning. And there's a lot of feelings about who was involved, and certainly it was a variety of people that we now know after, subsequent investigations. But really recognizing that, what was the answer? What was the one thing that I could do? And so the next day, like many people, I got up with my husband and we went downtown to survey, sort of what had happened. And in one breath, I was so sort of brought to tears about the work that was being done, the people who were downtown, who were cleaning up, who were committing. And then I was often reminded of, business owners who are not sort of in core downtown, but who might be a few blocks south in our South Division corridor. And, a few weeks after that, actually maybe just a week after that, one of our business owners on South Division in Alger, experienced a shooting into her building, which ultimately resulted in her losing her windows, which were quite costly. She's a small business owner who'd come to this country to, again, to be able to provide for that life for her family. And so I had this mixed feeling of, gratitude and appreciation, and also, sort of sadness for other parts of our community that sort of violence or vandalism or a disinvestment happens, and there are not people who kind of come regularly to clean up after those events, which happen not once in 30 or 40 or 50 years, but are happening, once a week or once a month, is something that they deal with all the time. And so that's what I find, that this role of city commission, of elected office, is one that is a myriad of emotions. It's, as my friend Erica would say, it's a both and. It's both that gratitude and appreciation, and it's the frustration and anger. And for me, as an elected official, as somebody who cares deeply about this community, it is figuring out what is the best way to channel that. To sometimes sit in our sadness and our frustration, because I think that's also part of a healing journey, is to sit with that discomfort, to sit with that conflict, to be angry, to experience that emotion. And then for me, after I do that, what is my action? What are the things that I'm going to do to follow up with, to commit to? And so after those events, there was, many calls for change and reform in our community. Myself and my colleague and another colleague were asking for, this reallocation of dollars, not in the spirit of anti-police, not in the spirit of really anti-anything, but really a spirit of how do we become pro-community. And how do we understand that our investments, our budgets, our strategic plans are what guides us, and they are a doctrine for, how we're going to exist in this community with others. And, probably one of the calls that I received the most as a city commissioner is around homelessness, is around, people sitting at bus stops, people in parks. There's somebody in my entryway at a business. And as a systems thinker, I think, okay, we have sort of a commitment to public safety, but what are the strategic and the long-term things that we are doing to make sure that everyone in this community feels safe? And sometimes those calls are met with a lot of anger and frustration about the individual who might be experiencing homeless. And sometimes it's done with a lot of care and consideration. It just sort of depends. And I'm sure, being in downtown, you all have experienced that as well. But for me, this reimagining, reallocation, this reckoning of how do we create environments that are more safe? What actually keeps us safe in our community? Certainly things like our oversight office, but even more so a recognition that Black lives do matter, a recognition that we have had disinvestment in communities of color here in Grand Rapids, and not only a recognition, but a commitment to continue to talk about it, to be very explicit about the disparities that exist in our community, and to be very explicit with those racialized outcomes. Here in Kent County, one in 8 African American Black families will experience homelessness, and one in, I think it's 68 families, white families, will experience homelessness. And so that's just housing, which comes to mind. It's one of the most important issues that, again, people call me and connect with. But especially during COVID, my home is my refuge. It is the place that I come at the end of the day. If I have gone out to work, if I've been at a commission meeting, and to know that so many people don't have this during this time, and to know that there are huge racial disparities, is really what has the frustration, but is also that commitment to move forward and to look for those solutions. I think, as we are going into the fall and not quite sure what's going to happen with our systems like school, our city manager has laid out, a timeline to address and to talk about the issues of public safety, and to also review our budget and to review a timeline. I'm hopeful in the hope of this community. I'm going to take that from a friend who said that to me. I'm hopeful in the hope of this community. Unfortunately, during this time, I've had people say really horrible things over the phone, over email. And, I think at some point, it is very hard not to take things personal. It's very hard not to feel sort of, immense sadness that some parts of our community experience Grand Rapids one way, and some parts of our community experience Grand Rapids in a completely different way. And that's evident in things like the emails that we receive as commissioners, certainly in our call-in at our commission meetings. And what I hope, and my ultimate goal, is that when we have things like that, there are not that disparity in that. And then to me, that is truly will be the reflection of this city, and really, as our motto suggests, that there is strength in activity, and to continue that activity to reduce those racialized outcomes. And knowing that oftentimes the work of equity will feel like you are losing something. And I think that's where we're at in this moment with our city, is that we have talked about equity, we have read books, we have had presentations, we've been to cities. I've been on trips where we've gone and talked about what we've done, and others have come here. But now we are at the point of operationalizing that, which means dollars, which means programs, which means outcomes that we are looking for it to be different, to reduce those racialized disparities. And so, again, I am hopeful in the hope of so many people who reach out. I try to focus on that versus, I think, some of the anger, the sometimes boiling down of a very complex issue into something as simple as, you just don't like people. And to me, it's so much more than that. It really is making sure that our investments, what we say we hold dear, is what is reflected in things like our budget, our master plan, and other, guiding documents and fundamentals of the city. And some of my last thoughts, I'll just leave you with the hope that I have of, the power of this community. Over these last couple of months, I found a lot of strength in core groups of friends and people that have been around me. My Latina Network of West Michigan, an organic collective of women. We started about almost 6 years ago. And during that time, I have just seen the extension of love and of grace to one another, people helping other people out with their children, with school, with groceries, and that reflection of love for me. My love language is definitely acts of service. And so I wish I could be there in service with all of you in person, spending some time talking even after, doing this. But my hope is that, some of my sharing of what it has been like to be an elected official over this last 9 months in an unprecedented time will create some conversation as you're talking with your neighbors, as you're talking with family members about not only being frustrated maybe about the disparities that exist in our community, but how we can work together to operationalize racial equity and to ensure a more prosperous Grand Rapids for everyone. I think, those words that I uttered of ancestors, please guide me. I hope that one day there will be, more Latina commissioners. There will be individuals who aren't represented on this community. And I have a young niece that was born during the campaign last year. And, my hope is that, she decides to be in public service. But I hope that in the future generations, the work that we're doing, I know that we may not see it. I know that, my 4 years of elected office and hopefully another 4 more, I may not see sort of the fruits and the work that we are doing today, but I am hopeful in those next generations, and maybe one day they will say and ask for me to guide them as well. Thank you so much. I hope that you all are well. I hope that you are checking in on one another, and I just wish you all a wonderful day, afternoon. Be well. Thank you.
Thank you for being here with us this morning. Thank you to Milinda for your encouraging and inspiring words. Thank you to Danny Heck for making these services possible. Thank you to the Religious Services Committee who makes this entire series possible, and thank you to each of you who week after week continue to show up, even in this COVID reality where church might look and feel a little bit different. I am so glad you are with us this morning, and from the bottom of my heart, know, trust, and believe that you are missed and yet a very deeply and valuable part of this community, no matter how spread out we are. Until next week, go in peace, live in health, and stay resilient, my friends, until we meet again. Thank you.